Week 17 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking this week in championship week for fantasy football owners. Week number 1, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. So last week, definitely a down week it was for Josh Allen, but we saw James Cook score 2 touchdowns, Tyler Johnson scored a touchdown, and they hit a field goal in that game. So Josh Allen, he didn't have many opportunities where once that football was within the 10-yard line, they just ran it in for the easy score was the Buffalo Bills. And also Allen banged up a little bit where he's day-to-day right now. But this week I expect him to play. He's a gamer, Josh Allen. He don't miss games. And even in a tough matchup versus the Eagles this week, I expect a bounce back. Number 2, Drake May of the New England Patriots. So May having a great season, MVP type of season. It's going to be him and Matthew Stafford most likely winning that award. And this week, it's a slam dunk matchup at the New York Jets, a defense that can't stop anyone. We saw May and this Patriot team come back from an 11-point deficit in the fourth quarter and win last week at the Baltimore Ravens. And I expect May once again to go out there and put up his numbers where weekly pretty much you could pencil him in for 275 and 2 touchdowns. Number 3, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. Burrow a couple weeks ago had a horrible game versus the Baltimore Ravens where he didn't do anything. And then last week at the Dolphins went out there and put on a huge performance in that game. So this week, another great matchup. Arizona coming in. The defense can't stop anyone. We saw Atlanta go up and down the field versus defense last week. And I think Burrow could be in for a big performance once again. Number 4, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So Matthew Stafford having a monster year, like I said, 40 passing touchdowns on the season. Him and Puka Nacua locked in. He's spreading that football out. And this week in a great matchup on the fast track in Atlanta, and pretty much coming off a bye week where they've had 10 days off, playing Thursday, and now on Monday night is this Ram team. I think Stafford goes out there and once again lights up the scoreboard. Number 5, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this offense is taking the next step over the last few weeks is this Jaguar team. And this week a great matchup at division rival, the Indianapolis Colts, where we just saw Brock Purdy and the Niners go out there and put up a big performance where Purdy had 5 touchdowns. And Lawrence in the last 2 games, he's had 9 touchdowns in that time, including going into Denver and winning that game last week, 34-20. So Lawrence this week at Indianapolis, where him and Jacoby Myers are locked in, and Brenton Strange, I think, goes out there, has another big game. Number 6, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. So Lamar, he's not 100%. His numbers are definitely taking a hit this season, and he's been banged up a majority of the season with the hamstring injury, a groin a little bit, and now it's the back where he left last week's game versus the Patriots with the injury. But this week, if Lamar's in the lineup, which I think he still will be, with obviously the season pretty much on the brink here for this Baltimore Raven team, it is a tough matchup at the Green Bay Packers. You know it's going to be freezing over there in Lambeau Field. But Lamar, he's a gamer, and he usually more times than not he finds ways to put points on the board. Number 7, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So this week, a mediocre matchup it is at the Buffalo Bills, where this Bill defense is better at home than it is on the road. And this offense is definitely rolling over the last few weeks. A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts have been on the same page over the last month. Devonta Smith's going out there making plays. But I just think Jalen Hurts, his ceiling's a little bit capped with a guy like Saquon Barkley in the backfield. And also where they're playing with a lot of leads and don't have to throw the football a whole lot, where these other quarterbacks ahead of them are getting more throwing attempts and putting up more points over the last few weeks. Number 8, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. Dak having a good season up there amongst the league leaders in passing yards. But this Cowboy team, once again, not making the playoffs this year. But when you got 2 guys like CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens in a great matchup at a bad Commander defense and a banged-up secondary, I think Prescott, he could go out there once again and score anywhere from 22, 28 fantasy points. Number 9, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. It's been a good season for Jared Goff, but this Lion team, they're not making the playoffs this year. And this week it's a matchup on the fast track in Minnesota, where I know Minnesota's defense has been decent, but this offense is loaded. None of it since Dan Campbell's been the play caller for this Lion team. They're scoring the football more, but they just can't make the stops in timely situations. So this week in Minnesota, I think Goff, he'll go out there, and when you got 2 receivers like St. Brown and Jameson Williams, it makes everything easier. Number 10, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers, coming off that monster game, 5 touchdowns on Monday night versus at the Indianapolis Colts. This week, a little bit of a tougher matchup with the Bears coming in, and the Bears, one of the better teams this season, believe it or not, in the NFC. But Brock Purdy, when you got guys like George Kittle and Juwan Jennings, and obviously Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, it's going to make everything easier. So this week, I don't expect a 5-touchdown game, but anywhere 2 to 3 touchdowns and 250, 300 yards is a good possibility this week. 11, Jacoby Brissett of the Arizona Cardinals. So last week he actually had a down game with Jacoby Brissett. And we saw the Atlanta Falcons, they were double teaming Trey McBride, and they totally took him out of the game plan where Brissett had to go to a Michael Wilson. He had to go to his backup tight end, Elijah Higgins. But still, this is a great matchup this week at the Cincinnati Bengals. I think he bounces back. And we've seen it all season long in games they're trailing, and there's a lot of garbage time is where he really puts up his points. Number 12, Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix last week, a mediocre game. It was for him versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. This week, it's a matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. And a few weeks ago, versus Chief defense in Denver, he went out there and had a good game. So him and Cortland Sutton are hitting on big plays. Troy Franklin, he's been a good part of this offense of late. And R.J. Harvey, we know, is a solid receiver out of the backfield. So this week at a Chief team where their defense most likely will be on the field a lot. And, Bo Nix, especially in the second half, is where he really gets his numbers. I think he's a top 12 option. 13, Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. So Caleb Williams, it's been a decent season for him. But in terms of fantasy football, he'll have some big games and some mediocre games. So this week in a matchup at San Francisco, Chicago, they know they got to put points on the board. And also as well, the weather will be better in San Francisco than dealing with it in Soldier Field. So that's another plus as well. And especially coming off a big game from a comeback victory last week where he made big throws versus the Packers. I think his confidence is up. 14, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's been a down year for Baker and this Buc team. A lot of injuries on and off all season. And Baker Mayfield, he's just not making the right throws at times as well. And too much gunslinging. But this week it's a good matchup at the Miami Dolphins. A defense that just got torched by Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think Baker and this offense will get back on track. And Mike Evans, since he's been back in the lineup, he's looked good for this Buc offense. 15, Tyler Shough of the New Orleans Saints. So Tyler Shough, he's finding ways weekly to put up fantasy points. So Chris Olave, number one option in the passing game. Jawan Johnson, one of the better tight ends this season in the league. He's playing well. And Shough also brings some rushing appeal. So he was a good draft pick this season for a reason. And he's improving weekly. And at least the Saint team's been competitive. And now they got up to 5 wins on the season. So this week in a matchup at Tennessee, I think Shough could go out there and give you a decent performance. 16, Jackson Dart of the New York Giants. So last week, they really limited Jackson Dart, was the play calling over there in New York. Only 13 pass attempts. He wasn't playing his game. He wasn't looking right. And they don't want him to get another head injury. And rightfully so. But if you're going to put him out there as Jackson Dart and pretty much water him down and not make him play the game, that makes him a good quarterback. Obviously, that's a problem. So this week in Vegas, I know it's a great matchup, but it just looks like they're trying to protect Dart right now. Is a Giant team, and obviously that's not going to equal to many fantasy points. 17, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. So last week it was a great game for Herbert. It's the best he's looked since he broke the left hand in a few weeks, is Herbert. But it was the Dallas Cowboys, one of the worst defenses in the league. And this week it's a very tough matchup versus the Houston Texans. But the only thing we know, this Charger offense at home plays better. And also when you got guys like Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnston in this offense, and also now on some downs around their guts, and it makes things a little bit easier. But like I said, with a tough matchup versus the Texans, I don't think he's got a high ceiling. 18, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. So Love, he practiced in limited capacity to open up the week. And this week it's a decent matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens, where we saw the Patriots come back in the fourth quarter, and Drake May had a field day in that ball game. But Love last week, he got a bad concussion, helmet-to-helmet hit that sent him out early in the game, and obviously he didn't come back. But this week, if he's back in the lineup, I'm not going to have high expectations for Jordan Love, but still a serviceable quarterback. 19, Aaron Rodgers of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know he's down DK Metcalf this game is Aaron Rodgers, but even we've seen it this season. Games where Metcalf hasn't done much, Rodgers has still had a couple 20-point games under his belt. So this week it's a matchup with the division rival Cleveland Browns. The Brown defense obviously led by Myles Garrett, but Denzel Ward missed last week's game. And I think the Steeler defense could put their offense in good situations where it makes it easier for Rodgers. So I think Rodgers, as a back-end option for fantasy owners in this matchup, could be decent. And the 20th and final quarterback I'm ranking, Sam Darnold of the Seattle Seahawks. It's been a mixed bag of results in terms of fantasy points and numbers this season for Sam Darnold. And this week, it's not a great matchup for Carolina, where their defense is way better at home than it's been on the road this season. Is this Carolina defense. And Darnold, though, obviously, when you got a guy like Jackson Smith in the jig, but there's some weeks you're just going to work your way into some automatic points. But this week at Carolina, I'm not in love with the matchup. And even last week in the comeback versus the Rams, it was a lot of the special teams and the run game doing a lot of the work. So that's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.